Well, welcome back to another episode of the Financially Free Journey podcast. And I'm your host, Courtney Dyer. And this podcast aims to dispel the seemingly complex topic of personal finances and money management, debt, savings, investing, retirement, and even small business. Now, guys, let's face it, millennials just aren't known to be good with money, right? And according to Business Insider, 60% of millennials earning over $100,000 a year say that they're living paycheck to paycheck. And it's not an income problem. It's a financial literacy problem. And so Ramsey Solutions' newest personality, George Kamel, is joining us today and is on a mission to teach millennials how to handle money the right way. George is also the former host of the Dave Ramsey Show video channel, and he's the current host of the smash hit podcast, The Fine Print. So George, thank you so much for coming on the show today. How are you?
I'm doing so great. I'm so pumped to be here.
I'm going to ask what everybody wants to know, which is how is it hosting co-hosting with Dave Ramsey himself? How's that experience been?
Oh my gosh. It is the honor of a lifetime. Hosting the video channel for a long time, which was basically our YouTube live stream. I was kind of the Ryan Seacrest for Ramsey Solutions. So I was always a fan. So when I got on air with Dave for the first time, I said, Dave, long time listener, first time co-host. And it was
I love that.
It was just this epic moment where you're like, who gets to do this? The fact that I have this opportunity and this platform to spread our message, which changed my life. It's hard to not wake up and get fired up to show up to work every day.
Oh, absolutely. And you know what? You've got to be on your A game to co-host with, Dave Ramsey himself. And so I just want to reiterate to the listeners that we've got a true, financial expert on with us today. And I couldn't be more excited. I wanted you to reiterate to the listeners too a little bit more about your journey to joining Ramsey Solutions, becoming, one of the personalities, and why are you so passionate about helping individuals get out of debt?
I love that. Well, here's just a tidbit on my story. I grew up in the Boston, Massachusetts area, and I grew up with immigrant parents. And so when they moved here in the 80s, they had to conform to the American culture. And they ended up falling for the American culture, right? All of this idea of we've got to have payments, we've got to have the house, we've got to have the car, debt is normal. And so I fell for those traps too. I was the average millennial when it came to money. I'm 32 now. And when I graduated college, I had $36,000 in student loan debt that I didn't know about because my parents just said, hey, don't worry about college, we've got it. And I thought, man, they're rich. This is great news. Turns out they meant co-signing loans for me.
Ouch.
And so I graduated with $36,000 in student loan debt, and I ended up racking up $4,000 in credit card debt for my lifestyle and to live because you're broke when you have all the student loan debt and you make very little money coming out of college. And so I took all of these shortcuts, and where it led me was to anxiety and cynicism and this kind of financial nihilism that people find themselves in where they just go, man, I got screwed. And so I've been screwed by my own financial ignorance. I've fallen for, online scams. I've been taken advantage of with identity theft. I've been ripped off through slick marketing. And I just had this feeling like, man, I got bullied. The culture of debt out there is really just a schoolyard bully.
Yeah, it's real.
And so I realized through that process that debt is not my friend. Debt is not a tool. Debt exists to make other people rich and keep me dependent on the system. And so that's where Ramsey intersected my life. I started here as an intern back in 2013 because I just thought, well, this is a good company. This will be a good job. And so I realized, if I'm going to work for a company like this who has such strong principles, I'm going to follow them. I'm going to be the test tube Ramsey baby and be a product of this and see if it really works. And so I started the baby steps back in 2013. And in less than a year from now, I'll be at baby step 7 with a paid-for house at 32 years old.
I heard that. Oh, I heard that when you were co-hosting with Dave, and I mean, my heart almost dropped at 32. And like you just said, you're not making a multi-million-dollar salary, right? No. I mean, you're a normal, everyday person.
Yes, exactly. And so that alone, I realized, man, I wonder how many other people had the same mindset I did where they just thought, well, this is normal. I just got to live with my payments. And who pays cash for cars? You can't do that. And who pays off their student loan debt? That's not possible. Only rich people can do that and people with trust funds. And so following these steps, which they're simple, if you've heard them before, you go, yeah, that's common sense, man. But doing it, that's a whole nother story. And so this stuff absolutely changed my life. I met my wife here at Ramsey Solutions. She still works here. So I get to, she's my coworker and my wife, which is a lot of fun. And so she was debt free as well when I met her. And so we got on the same page very early on, which was great news. Let me tell you, when you get your spouse on board who's just as fired up about you are about your financial goals, it changes everything. So we've been on this journey together the last, we've been married almost 3 years now. And we just got so focused and decided, what would life be like if we had a paid for house in our early 30s? What could we do? What options would we have? What kind of trips could we take? What kind of giving could we do? So that just got us really excited about living this lifestyle. I didn't do it to impress Dave. I didn't do it for any other reason other than I wanted this financial freedom.
Well, and the freedom, the decisions is really where the freedom comes down to, because you're not tied down, you're not strapped to this mortgage payment. And now you have options that then support your ability to be where you want, with who you want, when you want, right? And that's really a lot of what you guys talk about, there at Ramsey Solutions. And, you talked about the debt trap. And this is such a critical issue in our society and our culture, right? Lifestyle inflation. We hear about it all the time. Every time you get a 3% raise, you already need 3% more just for your living expenses. It's this perpetual trap. And so let's talk about debt a little bit more. I mean, why, in your opinion, do you think that debt is such a prevailing issue in America?
Well, I think that in American culture, we are very impatient. And so where that leads you is to any shortcut possible to get the thing you want, right? The American dream is like, get all the things you want out of life. And once we realized as a culture that, hey, there's a lot of shortcuts to get there. And every single one of those shortcuts is debt, right? It's leasing the car or getting the car on payments because you got to impress your friends. It's getting way too much house because the bank said, yeah, we'll give you $500,000. And you realize that you're house poor and barely can breathe. And so I think what's led us into this thing is this primrose idea that, if we just work hard in school and we go to a great college, that life's going to be really wonderful for us. And I think everyone who's our age, the millennials out there are going, man, I got lied to. Man, nobody told me this. Nobody taught me this. No one showed me how much a student loan payment would be versus my actual income that I thought was going to be way higher. And so no matter what people's incomes are, they feel like it's never enough. And that's because they're not living on less than they make. They're getting into all kinds of debt. They're taking all these shortcuts and then wondering why they're living with this anxiety and cynicism.
Yeah, you see that all the time. I mean, you can have a $30,000 a year income or $100,000, and it really does start with the financial literacy. And if you're not living below your means now, when you make that next jump to the higher salary, what makes you think you're going to live below your means then, right? I mean, it's a mentality. Would you agree?
Absolutely. It all starts with mindset. And if you can't get past that, you're very rarely going to do these steps and get to that financial freedom. And we just had a debt-free scream the other day. I was on the air with Dave, and this girl from Kentucky was here, and she's in her 20s, and she made about $34,000 a year, so not a ton of money. And she had paid off $15,000 in 2 years. And she was like, the reason I wanted to do this debt-free scream was to show people that it's not about your income. Because most people with $34,000 in income are going, I'm not paying off debt. I can't get. I don't have the money. I need to make more money, right? Yep. And she sold her TV and her couch, and she didn't make much. And she said that actually made me more productive because I wasn't sitting around and I wasn't watching Netflix. And so she was out there doing all kinds of side hustles. And so it started with a mindset for her where she said, hey, things don't have to be this way. And if I'm willing to sacrifice for a short period of time, I can get out of this mess and I can start to take steps towards a better future.
Well, what's the saying that you guys say? Live like nobody lives now to live like nobody can live in the future. I just messed it up. How do you guys say it?
That was a great attempt. Live like no one else, so later you can live and give like no one else. And so that can be a weird thing for people to say or to hear, and they go, what does that mean? But all it's saying is if you sacrifice now, you can do amazing things later on. And so a lot of people hear our plan and they're like, what? Dave doesn't want me to have nice stuff. Dave doesn't want me to eat out. And it's like, no. We're just saying not now. And sacrifice temporarily for, 18 to 24 months is the sweet spot we find it takes most people to pay off their consumer debt. And then what would you do if you had no payments in the world? what would that free up in your bank account? And what if you had an emergency fund and when the next pandemic hit or the next crisis hit, you were prepared and you weren't scared and it was just an inconvenience instead of an emergency?
Oh, I love, and you don't have to finance that emergency with a credit card, right? Which we see statistically speaking, what is it? Almost 70% of Americans don't even have $1,000, the starter emergency fund available to them in the time of crisis. And we're talking about, needing new cars or new tires on your car or a medical bill pops up. I mean, small things that will happen. And the majority of adults in America are not prepared to do that without the assistance of debt. Today's episode is brought to you by Hellofresh. Do you feel like you are stuck in a dinner rut? Well, with Hellofresh, you get fresh, pre-measured ingredients with mouth-watering seasonal recipes that are delivered right to your door. Skip all of those trips to the grocery store and really count on Hellofresh to make home cooking easy, fun, and affordable. And you can now enjoy cooking and getting dinner on the table in 30 minutes or less. With over 25 recipes to choose from each week, there is something for everyone to enjoy. All recipes are designed and tested by professional chefs and nutritional experts to really ensure deliciousness and simplicity. Now, go to the link in the show notes to get $80 off, including free shipping on HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit.
Oh, absolutely. And we've seen some really sad stories coming out of the last, 18 months where people weren't prepared. I mean, we just released an episode on The Fine Print where we talk about the pandemic and what steps can we take to kind of bulletproof our finances for the next crisis that comes into our lives, because we're not trying to be negative Nancy's, but there's another thing coming, whether it's this or another thing or a job loss or a health thing. And so the more we can be prepared and take those steps to take control, the less we're going to be worried about it and the better we're going to sleep at night.
Absolutely. I mean, just in our lifetime. So we're about the same. I'm 33, so we're the same age. And, we've seen the Twin Towers, we've seen the recession, we've seen the housing crisis, we've had a pandemic. And so, you just think those are major events, right, that you have to recover from. And why would we think that that's not going to happen again in the future? It absolutely will. It might have a different name. And, it's not going to be the pandemic next time, maybe, but, what are you going to do different to be prepared and be empowered, to be financially, able to make through? So it's just, I love that it's the not being impatient and not trying to take shortcuts. I mean, that really is, one of the biggest issues that we see.
Yeah. And I'm just so sick of seeing people held back, people in their 20s and 30s who are held back by crippling debt. They're held back by a lack of wise spending. They're held back by a lack of savings. And, we did this Borrow to Future podcast series. It was an 8-episode kind of documentary style series that I hosted on the student loan crisis. And I interviewed so many people, and it was heartbreaking because you hear these stories of people who go, hey, we want to start a family, but we can't because of this debt. Or I feel like a terrible husband because of the financial situation I put my family in. And it just makes you break down in tears to hear these stories and go, man, if they could just get out of this mess, their life could turn around 1,000%.
The shame that's associated. Oh yeah. I mean, you just think people are so they are holding back getting married or having children or buying a home because of the shame that's associated with this debt that they've taken on. And so again, it's that financial literacy. How can we help people, get out of it or potentially help people not get into it, right? If we get to them younger. So that takes me to my next question for you is, what have you seen over the course of the years as, maybe one of the top money myths that individuals fall for?
I love this. I love myth busting. It's a lot of fun, especially when it comes to money. And I hear these all the time. One of the biggest ones, and there's a bunch, but I think one of the biggest ones that's pervasive in our culture today, especially among millennials, is this myth that my credit score is everything. And my self-worth is tied up in this 3-digit number that tells me how I'm doing financially.
Well, tell us a little bit more, because to go buy a mortgage or go have a mortgage, you're going to need a good FICO score, right? To go get a car, you're going to need a good FICO score. So expand on that a little bit more. I'm curious, your school of thought around what role does a credit score play, and how much, importance does it have in, our financial picture?
So at Ramsey, we call it an I love debt score, because that's really what it does. It just tells you how good you are at borrowing money and paying it back. And so when you look at the actual numbers behind this of what makes up a credit score, which by the way, they're very tight-lipped about it, which is already, let's red flag number 432, that they're not telling you how the score is even made up. So you go, well, how do I game the system? How do I build it? Go into more debt. Okay. And so what we do know is that 35% of your score is based on your debt history. So that's how much you've borrowed over the years. Another 30% is your current debt level. That's how much you owe right now. Another 15% is how long you've been in debt. 10% is any new debt you've acquired in the last year and a half. And the final 10% is based on the type of debt. And so I don't know if you guys heard a theme there, but in every single one of those scenarios, there was a theme, and that word is debt. And so the only way to have a good credit score, and I'm not making this up, it's to go into debt, stay in debt, and continually pay your accounts perfectly without adding or paying too much off.
Absolutely. Because if you pay your account off, then your FICO score will drop. So that's enough. If you pay off an auto loan, you're going to see it drop. If you pay off a line of credit, you're going to see it drop. If you close a credit card, you're going to see a big ding in your FICO score. So I love that you bring that up. The lack of transparency is like a huge red flag because, I've had a lot of people ask me over the years, well, how do I fix my credit score? And it's like, I wish I could tell you. I mean, I work in the finance industry and I don't know. So, it's a game.
Well, it's funny that you say that because you're talking about, hey, this is why no one wants to pay off their debt because they're scared their credit score is going to go down. I mean, how backwards is this that we're willing to stay into debt to keep our credit score up? And so, I had to grapple with this myth when I first started here at Ramsey. And as I paid off my debt, my credit score became indeterminable. And so there's really no way to have a zero credit score. That's literally impossible. But what happens is they go, you have no more credit history once you pay off your debt, and it's been a little while. And so when I went to buy a house, I had to do it without a credit score. And when I went to buy a car, I was able to do it with cash. And so I didn't need a credit score. And so there's all kinds of ways, and I can walk you through all of those, from renting a car to getting a hotel to renting apartments. I've done all of it without a credit score. And so this myth that you need one, this is not theory. This is real life, and I've lived it, and I've seen so many other people live it. But what happens is it becomes an excuse. And we say, well, I'm not going to pay off my debt because the credit score, it just makes life easier. And I'm like, maybe we need to make life a little less easy because easy sounds a lot like broke.
It sounds a lot like, and I've heard you and Dave and Rachel Cruz all have that same, conversation around people have this misconception or this myth that, well, I've got to have a credit card because what if I want to rent a car? What if I want to go, stay in a hotel? They have to have a credit card. It's like, you can do those things without a credit card. That's what people want you to believe. That's the narrative, but that's not necessarily the truth.
Yeah. And when you think about it, who does this help? Well, it helps the lenders. It helps the big banks. It helps all these companies who are making tons of money off your back, who want to keep you in the system. And so, of course, they're big fans of the credit score, and they're all happy to use that number to determine your worth as a human. And so what I found out is, Dave Ramsey doesn't have a credit score because he has no debt. So Dave Ramsey can't rent an apartment, right? If they say, well, you need a credit score to rent, Dave. And he goes, no, but I could buy the entire apartment complex. And so you go, maybe the system is broken if it's not taking into account your income, your savings, your actual net worth. All it's looking at is your relationship with debt.
Yeah, no, again, what a red flag, right? And, that takes me to my next thought here is our listeners have debt, right? Just like the majority of American adults have debt, and taking action on eliminating debt can almost feel paralyzing at times because sometimes it's like, this is too much to tackle. I'm not even going to look at it. So what type of advice do you have, or maybe some actionable tips that the listeners can take to start eliminating their debt, seeing progress, and feeling positive about what they're doing?
Absolutely. This is the age-old question that we've been answering for years. And it turns out if you listen to the answer and you do it, it works every time. And so we walk people through the 7 baby steps. This is the exact path I took to pay off my student loans in 18 months, that $36,000, that $4,000 in credit card debt. And here's what it looks like. It looks like, first of all, there's a baby step 0 that no one really talks about, and that's to stop borrowing money. We're saying no to debt. We've got to take it off the table. We got to get current on our bills and get on a plan. So once we get there and that mindset shift, like you're talking about, we can get to baby step 1, where we save up $1,000 for a starter emergency fund. This is not your long-term emergency fund. We know this is not going to cover the big things in life, but it's going to cover all those little ankle biter things like you're talking about. Oh, I popped a tire. I've got to get a new tire. Oh, I got a little medical bill over here. And it makes you stop needing to go back to that credit card as a crutch, and you have that fund. You become your own bank. Imagine that. And so once you've got that $1,000, that's where we're going to start paying off debt in baby step 2.
Let's take a moment to thank this episode's sponsor, Ether Diamonds, the world's first sustainable diamonds and the only diamonds that are actually good for the planet. Ether has created the world's first positive impact diamonds, made from air through a process that removes harmful air pollens, captures the carbon from it, and then retasks that carbon to a higher purpose in their one-of-a-kind diamonds. These are 100% real diamonds with a real impact. In fact, every carat of Ether diamonds offsets your personal carbon footprint for over a year. They're some of the highest quality diamonds you can buy and certified by IGI, the world's largest independent laboratory for testing and grading gemstones and fine jewelry. You're no longer stuck having to choose between mined and regular lab-grown diamonds, both of which are harmful for the environment. Ether offers the only truly sustainable diamonds on the market, requiring no ethical or environmental trade-offs. They're the only guilt-free diamonds available in the world. So to learn more about these revolutionary diamonds from air, visit their website at etherdiamonds.com. That's AETHER diamonds.com, and check them out on social media at etherdiamonds.
Where we pay off all of our consumer debt using the debt snowball method. And so here's how that works. You list out all of your debts from smallest to largest, and here's the thing. For you math nerds, the type A folks, we're going to ignore the interest rate. I know that's hard to do. It's hard to stomach, but trust me on this. We need motivation. We need progress. This is about behavior, not math. So once we lay out all of our debts from smallest to largest, we're going to pay minimum payments on all of the debts except for the smallest one. And on that smallest one, we're going to attack it with a vengeance. So we're going to take up all of the margin we can muster from our budget, from cutting expenses. And remember, this is all temporary. So this is not forever. This is just a for now, so we can get this debt out of our lives. So maybe you do take on a side hustle for a little while and you're driving for Shipt or Instacart or Uber or Lyft or whatever that might look like for you to bring in some extra cash. Maybe you're picking up an extra shift. Maybe you're cutting a subscription or two to get $20, $30 back in your life for a few months. So once we do that, we're going to attack that smallest debt, and it's going to disappear really quickly because it's the smallest one. And so we're going to feel that progress. And so now we have freed up a payment because we're not making the payment on that smallest debt anymore, and we have that pile of cash we were throwing on top of it. So we're going to use that on the next debt and the next debt and the next debt until all of our debts are gone. And most people we found can do this regardless of their income, can do it in 18 to 24 months if they're getting tense.
See, again, 18 to 24 months, that's going to come, right? And I would rather in 18 months to not have that debt just weighing on me still. So it's going to come either way, but why not make that emotional burden lifted by going through this process? And so I'm a huge Dave Ramsey fan. I love tuning into the show, and it never fails. People will call in and they'll tell they'll tell their story and their situation, and Dave will be like, okay, so you're gonna have to pay it off. You're gonna, and it goes through the same process because again, it's the surefire way to make sure that you actually get out of debt, you start building wealth and being able to live your dream life. And I do like that you also reiterated it's not about the highest interest rate; it's about the lowest balance. And what's the psychology behind that?
Well, the psychology is when you start to put the highest interest rate first, well, that debt can be massive and it can feel like it's too big of a mountain to tackle. And so what we found is people lose steam, right? If you have too big of a goal, if you're like, hey, I'm going to start running, but I'm going to run 7 miles on my first day. That's what you're doing with the avalanche method where you look at the interest first. And so I don't know about you, but I'd rather the snowball roll than have to have me tackle the avalanche. So yeah. I like this method because it does focus on those small wins. And we all need that, right? If you're doing a diet, you want to feel like you're making progress. And so when you get on the scale every day and you don't see anything moving, you start to go, this isn't working. I'm going to give up. I'm going to go back to the old way. I'm going to keep eating fast food. And the same thing applies to our money. When we see that scale start to move, and you do when you start paying on that smallest debt, you start to go, oh my gosh, I was hoping that this would work, and now I'm thinking this could work, and now I know this can work. I believe this can work. And so once you get from hoping to believing, it changes everything. And so it absolutely, we talk about this, it's 80% behavior and 20% money knowledge, right? Everyone thinks they can outsmart the system, and they think, well, I'm decent at math, I'm decent with money, I can do this my way. Well, I thought that too, and it turns out my plan sucked and it wasn't working. And so you've got to kind of swallow your pride and submit yourself to a proven process, to a proven plan, someone else's plan. And the good news is this plan has worked for millions of people, and I've met these people face to face, and the joy on their face when they scream, "I'm debt-free," it is so visceral, you can't help but have a smile glued to your face for a good 5 minutes after hearing a debt-free scream. So be inspired by other people. And just do this stuff. And hey, if it doesn't work, you can go back to your plan.
Yeah, if it doesn't work, you might know more, and go back to your own plan. No, that is so freeing. And again, I love that you spoke to the psychology behind money, because a lot of people think and they view money as just a tactful tool, right? But really, there's so much psychology and emotion behind the way that we think about money and the way that we interact with money. And so I think really understanding that and being aware of that is critical. That makes me think, what is the biggest money mistake you've ever seen people make? What's the most wild one?
Ooh, the biggest money mistake I've seen anyone make. Well, I've got to say the student loan crisis is one of the biggest just dumpster fires I've ever seen. And so I think if there's a mistake that people are making, if I had to go back and pinpoint something, it goes back to college choice and the choice to take out student loans. And people go, "Well, George, it wasn't a choice. I was forced." No, you weren't forced. You made a choice to go to a school that had a price tag that meant you had to take on debt. And everyone has a choice. And I want people to understand that they have power, that they can take control of their life, that life isn't just always happening to them, and that they can make choices, they can make sacrifices to make all of that come true. And what I've seen is a lot of people make the mistake of taking out all of these student loans with the hopes that, well, I'll make good money and I'll pay it off when I pay it off, or I'll pay it off real quickly, right? And I talk to high schoolers. This is the most hilarious thing. Talk to a high schooler about their plans for college and how much school is going to cost and how they're going to pay for it. They don't have a clue. And so we're letting these 17, 8-year-old kids just step into $150,000, $200,000 in debt in some cases, and they just don't have any idea about what life is going to be like on the other side. They're just hoping because they said, well, my parents told me to go to work hard and just get into a really good school. And that good school has a giant price tag that's going to swallow your adult life when you graduate.
Oh, the audacity that the government has to essentially lend 18-year-olds unsecured debt, right? I mean, you can't even go buy a stick of gum on credit when you're 18 without your parents signing, but you can sign up to become a cash flowing asset to the government for $100,000. And it really truly is a crisis. And I know that Anthony O'Neill, who was just on your last episode, and I had the opportunity to bring him on, and I know that he was talking a lot about the documentary coming out, Borrowed Future. Mm-hmm. And the listeners, if you guys haven't watched the trailer, I mean, these conversations that are being had, like what George just talked about, the cultural expectation around going to college and the lack of financial literacy, it's creating such a crisis in our society that people are coming out with tremendous amounts of debt. And as George had mentioned earlier, putting off, huge milestones in their life, like having children or getting married. And so I would agree, George. I think it is one of the biggest money mistakes that people make.
Yeah. And, we're talking about this crisis, and what gives me hope, because I don't want to be all doom and gloom, what gives me hope is the next generation. So I just hosted our high school curriculum. We updated it. It's amazing. And we're in 48% of the schools in America.
Wow.
And it gives me hope to hear stories of kids that are 14, 15, 16, 17, and they're going, hey, because of going through your curriculum, I realized that the credit score is a scam. And I realized that I can go to school debt-free, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to get there, even if it means going to my community college for 2 years and transferring and using that time to save up and work a side job and work on scholarships. And so I got to say that, Gen Z gets a bad rap, millennials get a bad rap. But let me tell you, there's two kinds. There's sucks and there's awesome. And I get to hang out and talk to the awesome ones every day. And it gives me so much hope because people realize, oh, it's in my control. Life just doesn't have to happen to me for the next 50 years and then I die. I can make choices. I can take back that control and decide what happens with my life. And I think that's what all millennials want, right? We don't want to work to just make a living to then retire at 65. We want more than that out of life. We want purpose. We want meaning. We want freedom. We want options. And I think that's great. I just think we have to do the hard work to get there and not take all these shortcuts.
Yeah. I mean, you have to put in the work. You can absolutely have that, but you have to put in the work and have a really great plan. And you have to execute that to be able to get to that time freedom that I think so many people are seeking after. What is the best piece of I mean, I just asked you the worst money mistake, but what would you say is the best piece of financial advice that you have ever received, and why?
The best financial advice I've ever received was to live on less than you make. Mm-hmm. I think that's what everything comes down to. Because once I realized that it all comes down to margin, really, when you think about it plainly and you go, okay, if I make this much and I live on this much, I'm going to have this much left over. And that leftover is what can cause you to become a millionaire. It's what causes you to be able to pay cash for a car, to save up that down payment, to get out of debt. And so it all comes down to margin, which all comes down to living on less than you make. Once I realized that just because you make $50,000 doesn't mean you need to spend $50,000. That was a game changer for me, because I just thought, well, you got to spend it. You got to live your life, right? That's what we hear is, man, I don't want to wait till I'm 65 to live my life. But what they don't tell you is that living that way will keep you broke until you're 65 and beyond. And then you can't retire with dignity. And we're seeing that with, my parents' generation, right? Where they didn't really take the steps financially to set themselves up, and they're paying on their mortgage for 35 years because they took out a HELOC and a second mortgage, and they never took steps to get out of that debt. And now we're seeing the sandwich generation of millennials who are trying to provide for their kids and take care of their parents who didn't have it all together. And so it just breaks my heart to see that. And so I think living on less than we make, the sooner we can grasp that concept, the sooner we can take the right steps to financial freedom.
Well, and our parents' generation was the generation where it really did start to switch from the majority of employers were, providing a pension plan, Social Security. So really, you didn't have to put in that hard work of saving, living on less than you make, because when you retired at 65, really the benchmark was your age, right? And so then you had a pension available, you had your Social Security available, but a lot of that started to shift to where now, what is the statistic is something around 20% of, working adults in America have some type of pension available to them. And that used to be quite the opposite. And so we've had to have this real mind shift change around, we have to provide our own retirement. And that's where I love to say, I'm not working towards retirement. I'm working towards becoming work optional, because that can happen at any age, right? It doesn't happen at 65. So I think we are that generation where we're having to make that switch truly. So
That's so good.
I want to talk about the fine print because I love it. I need more episodes, George. That's first and foremost. So okay. Okay. I mean, when you launched this, it became number one. Guys, George's podcast outranked Dave Ramsey for a while there. I don't know where it landed right now, but I mean, crazy. Talk to us about the fine print.
Absolutely. Yeah, I rubbed that in Dave's face, but then I had to remind myself that Dave is the reason it was number one, because we talked about it on his show. So it felt good, but you have to remind yourself, who butters the bread around here. So very thankful. It was still, the feedback has been amazing. And here's the elevator pitch for the fine print. It's all about the hidden truth that's keeping you broke, because a lot of people that are listening right now, they're not where they want to be financially. And yes, they may have made some money mistakes. And yes, it's their fault. They made choices, and that's okay, because I want them to know they can take control. They don't have to keep getting screwed by all these sketchy companies and bad products and slick marketing and the money myths that are designed to keep them broken in debt. And so I want them to know they can live outside of this system. They can become confident in their money choices. And so in every episode, I do the research for them to save them time and money, so that they can be educated on these money trends, these money traps, and really start to make some better money choices. So we cover things like credit card rewards, this housing gold rush, and how to grapple with the housing market today. We're going to talk about cryptocurrency. Our latest episode was all about the pandemic and how to bulletproof our finances for the next crisis. We talk about buy now, pay later and all these Afterpay and Klarna services. We talk about the dirty truth behind your credit score. We'll be talking about bankruptcy and DIY investing. So I want to meet people where they are and the things that they're thinking about and help them understand how to make the right choices instead of just being glued to the next headline, social media, the next TikTok influencer, and trust all of them to make their next money choice.
Be informed, understand the fine print. And you heard it here, guys. George is really going to be covering some of the most sought after topics when it comes to personal finance. I mean, things like talking about crypto and the buy now, pay later. These are a lot of things that are up and coming, a lot of buzz topics. And so, get into the nitty gritty, and I will make sure to link your podcast in the show notes. So then that way the listeners can easily find it and start subscribing and listening. Where else can the listeners find you if they have, more questions or they just want to follow along your journey?
Absolutely. Well, you can always, I love connecting with people on social media. So if you want to find me on Instagram or Twitter, I'm at George Kamel, and that's Kamel. So I love connecting people on social, but I just love a good podcast. We're on one right now, and I host, the Borrowed Future podcast is an 8-episode, really cool narrative style series we did on the student loan crisis. So absolutely check that out, because the documentary version, the video version, is coming out in October. You can find that at borrowedfuture.com or just search Borrowed Future where you find podcasts. And then I also host one for people who are interested in business and entrepreneurship and leadership called Entre Leadership. And so you can search for that wherever you listen to podcasts and hear more of me if that's what you want. If that's what you want to do with your life, we're here for it.
George has got all of it covered. I mean, how many shows are you on, George? My goodness.
Too many. And the Ramsey Show, of course. You can find me there
Yes.
co-hosting with our personalities and Dave. That's 1 to 4 Central weekdays, and we're just taking people's calls. You know what I want is more millennials to call in, because I love serving millennials and help them understand what to do with their money and guide them along the way. So call into the show. I know we don't like to make phone calls anymore, but let's change that just for now.
They can't text in or snap.
No,
snap
I'm trying to get Dave to
Okay.
be open to text-ins, but it makes for much less exciting radio.
It's true. You got to have that conversation. You have to have Dave and George tell you need to eat some beans and rice. Okay.
Yes.
No. George, thank you so much for coming on today, taking the time to share your wisdom and your knowledge with the listeners. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, Courtney. The work you're doing is so important, and you are just crushing it. So I'm just thankful to know there's people like you out there who are helping spread this message of financial freedom and giving people hope that it's possible for them.
Oh my gosh, we're just vibing, guys. Thank you so much, George. And guys, if you're not already, make sure that you are following us on TikTok and Instagram, all the socials. It's at Financially Free Journey. And, I post daily tips and motivation to help you with your financial journey. And I look forward to hearing from all of you guys next week. Talk to you later. Now, are you starting a new business and you might be concerned about using your personal number? Well, for less than $13 per user, you can get a business line with Flex Plans. This is the all-new business phone plan by Virtual PBX. Flex Plans provides unlimited calling, business texting, video conferencing, all for entrepreneurs that need a way to connect with their customers. And it includes a free soft phone, plus it includes 2 free local toll-free numbers, a virtual receptionist, professional greetings, call forwarding, voicemail, text, and just so much more. So right now you can save 15% by visiting virtualpbx.com/podcast. Now that's less than $13 per user for your business line. So separate your private line from your professional line today by visiting virtualpbx.com/podcast.